Namaste. Welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the chapter Towards the Sevenfold Knowledge, page 765, beginning with the line, in the superconscious.
So, to summarize what we have been doing, Swamiji is speaking about the evolution, and the human man has to become the divine man. So, for that, what are the problems? So, Swamiji says the problems are that man is ignorant about himself, about the world, about everything. There are 7 ignorances, and he has already discussed the first ignorance is the constitutional ignorance. The constitutional ignorance is that we don't know that our being is made from materials which are in the universe. My body is made from matter which exists in the universe. My individual vital being is made from the universal prana. Okay? Similarly with the mind. So that's the first ignorance. The second ignorance is that we are not limited only to our body-mind life. We have in ourselves also. Our consciousness is subconscious, there is an inconscient, there is a superconscient, there is an intraconscient, and there is a circumconscient. All this we are completely unaware of. So that is the second ignorance that he has discussed. And for that, he has discussed the subconscious, he has discussed the inconscient, the subliminal, and the circumconscient he has discussed. Now he will tell us about the third ignorance, which is the temporal ignorance. We don't know that we had many past lives and we will also have future lives. Immortality. And immortality, he will tell us there are 2 types of immortality. We will read that. So, this is the background. We start reading now. You want me to read the previous summary?
No, we did that. Yeah.
In the superconscious, beyond our present level of awareness, are included the higher planes of mental being as well as the native heights of the supramental and pure spiritual being. We'll go sentence by sentence. Okay, so he is discussing there are 3 planes he is saying. The higher planes of mental being, these are above the pure mind. There is the higher mind, they are spiritual planes of consciousness. The higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, and the overmind. This is the second level. Okay? Then there is a supermind, which is the middle term.
Overmind.
The overmind is part of the spiritual planes of consciousness. Above the overmind is a supermind, which is quite different from these 4. Then above the supermind, there is what Swamiji is calling here pure spiritual being. So, pure spiritual being is the utter unmanifest. If you go into that, is the transcendent, the world doesn't exist for you. Okay. So, he is talking about 3 levels. Okay. So, again I repeat, the higher planes of mental being, these are the spiritual planes. When you make your mind silent, you go into these planes. The lowest of which is the higher mind. Okay? Higher mind does not have any thought. It has only got sight. It goes by sight. It sees things. Then the second is the native heights of the supramental, which is totally different from the mental planes. And then beyond that is the pure spiritual being, which is the unmanifest, if you want, or what you call so the 4th, the Turiya, the 4th. No one has gone there because if you go there, you can't come back. It's unmanifest. So you can't give a report. Okay? So that is the unknown. You know that there is something up there, but if you go there, you can't come back. Even if you come back into your body-mind life, you will not remember what you have experienced there. So, I go to the next sentence. The first indispensable step in an upward evolution would be to elevate our force of consciousness into those higher parts of mind from which we already receive, but without knowing the source, much of our larger mental movements. Those specially, or Chandra likes to use the word especially, that come with a greater power and light, the revelatory, the inspirational, the intuitive. So, Chandra is speaking about three planes which come from the supermind. Okay? Revelation, inspiration, and intuition. Revelation is direct sight. You see things. Inspirational is inspiration, which is hearing. Truth sight, truth hearing. And we can give one example of Surendra's hearing. Go to Pondicherry. That's inspiration. He used an interesting word, inspiration, but it is linked in Surendra's language. It means hearing the truth. Inspiration. It's not poetry inspiration, no. Okay? And then he's talking of the intuition. The intuition is knowing the truth, parts of the truth, not the whole truth, parts of the truth like a lightning flash, without the process of thought. There is no thought, you just come to know the truth, like a lightning, and you see the reality. But there is a fourth one which he is not speaking about here, that is the discrimination. We have to distinguish between this and that. Okay, so on these mental heights, in these largenesses, if the consciousness could succeed in reaching them or maintain and center itself there, something of the direct presence and power of the spirit, something even, however secondary or indirect, of the supermind, could receive a first expression, could make its initially manifest, could make itself initially manifest, could intervene in the government of our lower being and help to remold it. So what Sridhar is saying is that even if you are in the spiritual planes of consciousness above your mind, you are not in your body-mind life, you have gone to the second level of spiritual planes of consciousness, higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind over mind, then you can get glimpses of the supermind. Some amount of knowledge from there will come and you can give some expression to it without going to supermind. The reflection of supermental truths in the spiritual planes of consciousness. You'll get a flash, you'll know, oh, what it is. You'll not be able to live there. Nobody has lived there as yet. Okay? You get only flashes. Alright? So that's what he's saying. However secondary or indirect of the supermind could receive a first expression, could make itself initially manifest, could intervene in the government of our lower being and help to remold it. So if you go to that level, your nature can be remolded. So long as you are in your body-mind life, try as much as you want, you will not be able to change your nature. To be able to change your nature, you have to go up, and from there look down, and in the spiritual planes, you only look and see the imperfections. And those at that level, you don't see imperfections. You see only variations of nature. When you see the 7 colors, you don't say red is superior to this. Red is superior to green, you don't say. So when you see cruelty, when you see hate, all these things, you see exactly what it is. But you are not ascribing any negative qualities to it in our sense. Okay? You know that it's a limitation, but you don't view it in a moralistic way. Okay? So that's, you can change that if you have some amount of influence from the supermind. Some change can come, but not a full change. Okay? He's talking of the in the government of our lower being, body-mind life, and help to remold it. Afterwards, by the force of this remolded consciousness, the course of our evolution could ride by a sublimer ascent and get beyond the mental into the supramental and the supreme spiritual nature. So you can go from the mental which is not the first, not ignorance. He is talking about the mental planes, as I said, higher mind, intuitive mind, intuitive mind. From there you can go to the supermental, and from the supermental you can get also the supreme spiritual nature. Your nature will change completely. Okay, so it is possible without an actual ascent into these at present superconscious mental planes, or without a constant and permanent living in them, by openness to them, by reception of their knowledge and influences, to get rid of to a certain extent of our constitutional and psychological ignorance. So constitutional ignorance we have already discussed, okay, and psychological ignorance also. These two can go away, can disappear, the ignorances, if you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness and get a touch of the supermental. Even without a touch of the supermental, you are in a spiritual consciousness where these two ignorances can go away. Okay, so it is possible to be aware of ourselves as spiritual beings and to spiritualize, though imperfectly, our normal human life and consciousness. Now, what do we mean by it is possible to be aware of ourselves as spiritual beings? It means I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the vital. That's what it means by spiritual beings. We are pure soul and pure consciousness. There could be a conscious communication and guidance from this greater, more luminous mentality. Now note the words, greater, more luminous mentality, he is speaking of the spiritual planes. Okay? And a reception of its enlightening and transforming forces. So, you can have a conscious communication and guidance. You can get guidance also from there. Okay? So, that is within the reach of the highly developed or the spiritually awakened human being. Now, he is making a difference between highly developed and spiritually awakened being. So, highly developed, you are not spiritual, but you are open and sometimes you get intuitions. You could say in a certain sense, I mean, my interpretation, Einstein getting this intuition is a highly developed personality. If you are not highly developed, you cannot receive these intuitions. Okay? But he is not spiritual yet. You may get a glimpse of some spiritual truth, but a awakened, spiritually awakened being is one who is living in the spiritual planes of consciousness. His consciousness is not identified with body, mind, life anymore. His consciousness is there. That is within the reach. Okay. But it would not be more than a preliminary stage. Preliminary stage because Sri Aurobindo wants a total transformation. It's enough for the normal yogi. To reach an integral self-knowledge, an entire consciousness and power of being, there is necessary an ascent beyond the plane of our normal mind. So, if you want to go to spiritual planes, your consciousness has to go out of the body, mind, life and go to the spiritual planes of consciousness. Higher mind upwards. So long as you are here, you can't change out. You can try your best. And it's useful to try because it will add something. No effort is wasted, but you will not be able to transform. The effort will take you up and from there it is possible, but not from here. Now, such an ascent is at present possible in an absorbed superconscious, but that could lead only to an entry into the higher levels in a state of immobile or ecstatic trance. Now what Sri Aurobindo is saying? He is saying that to go into those higher regions, you cannot go while your consciousness is aware of the physical world. A waking consciousness will not take you there. Your waking consciousness will be sleeping. Someone who is watching you, your eyes may be open, but he will know that you are not in the physical world. He will see that you are not conscious of things here. You are conscious of things there only. So that is, he is using the word ecstatic trance, state of immobile ecstatic trance. Normally, People will think you are sleeping. One interesting example is, I'm not talking of Srimad and Mother, because they could be in a higher consciousness in the waking consciousness. That is possible. That's the first question that Mother asked Srimad when she came here. Is Samadhi necessary for spiritual progress? She asked Srimad. And Srimad said, no. And Samadhi means loss of physical consciousness. That's not necessary. Even if you are aware of the physical world, your consciousness can be there. But that's a pretty high stage. Here he is saying it's very difficult, it's not easy. Okay? So I give you one example, interesting example, which should not be, but this, what is his, they call him, I think, Sadguru or something like that.
Sadguru.
Huh?
Yeah.
So he was once in the higher consciousness for 13 days. He is not aware of the physical world, but he is up there, and he had not died. So when he woke up, he thought that he had gone there for 2 hours or so. But there was a huge crowd, all family members and all that, who were looking and wondering what's happened to him. Because for 13 days he wasn't awake. So that's an interesting, that's what Srimad means by ecstatic trance. State of immobile ecstatic trance. You are not aware of the physical world. If the control of that highest spiritual being is to be brought into our waking life, there you are, there must be a conscious heightening and widening into immense ranges of new being, new consciousness, new potentialities of action, a taking up as integral as possible of our present being, present consciousness, activities, and a transmutation of them into divine values which would effect a transfiguration of our human existence. For wherever a radical transition has to be made, there is always this triple movement: ascent, widening of field, and base, integration, in nature's method of self-transcendence. So Srimad says, nature is doing exactly that. Nature, when it is evolving and gone from matter to life to mind, it is not rejecting the lower, it is integrating. So that's exactly what we also have to do. Okay, so I read the summary of this one and then we go on to the next para. The constitutional and psychological ignorance, we shall now see what the superconscient is. In the previous paragraphs, he has dealt with the subconscious, the inconscient, the intraconscient, the superconscient, and the circumconscient. So now he is saying, he is dealing with the superconscient. All the universal planes above the normal mind may be called the superconscient. We have in the lower nature physical mind, vital mind, pure mind. When we make our mind silent, free of all thoughts and mental waves, the consciousness rises into the higher mind. There in the higher mind, no thoughts, only sight. Then the next is the illumined mind. There light reveals what needs to be known. Okay? And that's interesting, the illumined mind. He says that normally, if I want to know something, light has to be thrown on it. If I'm in a dark room, I can't see anything. But if I have to see that there is a chair there or a table there, I have to throw light on it. Then I can see. But in the illumined mind, the object itself illumines itself. There is no external light. That itself comes then into your consciousness which is awake, and then you see things. Okay? Then, next is the intuitive mind. The intuitive power is the power of identity. You can become what you want to know. Okay? And then finally you have the origin, which is the overmind, which is the origin of the multiplicity. The supermind is oneness. Okay? The supreme creator of the manifested universe is supermind. So these are planes which he calls mental planes, not the supermind. These planes are already the source and supplier of our larger mental movements, ideas, ideals, imaginations. Chiefly among these spiritual downward flowings are what Sri Aurobindo calls revelation, sight, drishti, vision. Revelation, other words, sight, drishti, vision. Next, inspiration. These are the things that come from above. Inspiration, hearing, voice guidance. Okay. Now I have put two examples. One is the example of go to Pondicherry, go to Chandranagar, sight hearing, truth hearing. But there is also another one, if you remember St. Peter's life. He is walking down the road in that area, in the West Asia area, Iraq, Iran, all those areas. I think he was walking towards Damascus. And then suddenly he hears Christ's voice saying, "Why do thou persecutest me?" He was actually against Christianity in the beginning. And when he heard this, his life changed. So this is hearing the truth. He heard the truth. He heard Jesus Christ telling him, "Why do thou persecutest me?" So that's another example of hearing. Okay, so then we have intuition. Intuition, lightning flashes of knowledge without logical chain of thought. Suddenly, like a drop of light, it comes into your mind. Intuition. Probably example is again Einstein, Newton, or even our mathematician Ramanujan. So that is also intuition. If man could raise his consciousness to these planes and station himself there above the mind, the power and presence of the spirit could be manifest in his lower being. If you can live there, the power and presence of the spirit can be felt even in the lower being. Later, with this preliminary transformed nature, the ascent could reach the supermind and the supreme spiritual heights. You can go up to supermind and even beyond that. I remind you that Sri Aurobindo is writing to Motilal Roy in Chandranagar and saying, "I was in Parabrahman consciousness for several hours." So that in trance, you go there and you come back. So several hours he was there. But you have to live permanently in those planes. That's the idea. If you live permanently in those planes, you can change your nature. Okay? So, but even without that final ascent, without even living in those rarefied heights, man could largely get rid of his constitutional and psychological ignorance. These two ignorances can go. This has been done by many rare yogis and spiritually awakened human beings. But to reach the highest supramental ranges, the yogin has to enter into a trance state and total loss of waking consciousness. The eternal waking awareness is withdrawn inwards and the consciousness rises into the supramental levels, accompanied by complete oblivion of the physical world. You can go there, but you are not aware of the physical world anymore. The highest planes. You have seen Mother, but I don't know if you have seen her going into trance. We have seen that very often. When we used to go to her, suddenly there is a call and her consciousness goes up and she loses consciousness of the physical body. Her head used to droop and no awareness of the physical. And suddenly she would again come back and start her distribution. So that's what somebody is saying. Okay, so he's saying the loss of total waking consciousness. The external waking awareness is withdrawn inwards and the consciousness rises to the supramental planes, accompanied by a complete oblivion of the physical world. If man has to achieve the supramental consciousness, there has necessarily to be a heightening, widening and integration of the lower into the higher. This is what he said in the para. We go to the next para. Any such evolutionary change must necessarily be associated with a rejection of our present narrowing temporal ignorance. Now he is talking of the temporal ignorance, which is the third one. So one by one he will go on dealing with the 7 ignorances. So what is the temporal ignorance? We do not know that we have past lives. We do not know that we can have future lives. Not knowing mentally. You and I know mentally. But that's not enough. You have to really experience it. Okay, so the rejection of our present narrowing temporal ignorance. Now he is explaining, for not only do we now live from moment to moment of time, but our whole view is limited to our life in the present body between a single birth and death. We are aware only of this life. And even this life we are not fully aware of. We don't know the future at all. And you remember anything of when you were 1 year old? No. So even our present life we don't know anything. I don't know about you, but my earliest memory is when I was 6 years old. Earlier than that I can't remember anything. So I can remember incidents from when I was 6 years old. 6 or 5 or something like that. Okay, so as our regard does not go farther back in the past, so it does not extend farther out into the future. Thus, we are limited by our physical memory and awareness of the present life in a transient corporeal formation. We are limited to our body-mind life, and we know only this life, and that also imperfectly. But this limitation of our temporal consciousness is intimately dependent upon the preoccupation of our mentality with the material plane and life in which it is at present acting. The limitation is not a law of the spirit, but a temporary provision for an intended first working of our manifested nature. It is exactly what nature needs, because if you are constantly in the higher planes, how are you going to live life normally here? You are not able to live normally. You need to eat, you need to buy things for yourself, you need to do this, you have to educate yourself. So nature has provided that you will be kept anchored to the body-mind life. It is necessary, they say. That's your ignorance. But once you have got that, then you can go up. So, temporary provision for intended first working of our manifested nature. The intended working is sensible living in the physical world. If the preoccupation is relaxed or put aside, an extension of the mind effected, an opening into the subliminal and superconscious, into the inner and higher being created, it is possible to realize our persistent existence in time as well as our eternal existence beyond it. Now, he will develop this theme. If you can live into your intraconscious, if you go or into spiritual planes of consciousness, you know that you are not the body-mind life. You know that you are pure consciousness, you are pure soul. And that soul is immortal. It has always existed in the past and it will exist in the future. But this is what Srimba calls time immortality. You are immortal in the physical world, you are aware of your past lives and your future. It is time immortality. But there is a timeless immortality. That's the second type of immortality. It's not just no birth, no death. It is that you have always existed and you are completely free of all your past lives and everything. You are pure divine being. That's a timeless immortality. This is time immortality. When you have a spiritual experience, it is time immortality. You know that you have always existed in time. Okay, so that's what he is. It's possible to realize our persistent existence in time as well as our eternal existence beyond it. That's a timeless. This is essential if we are to get our self-knowledge into the right focus. For at present, our whole consciousness and action are vitiated by an error of spiritual perspective, which prevents us from seeing in right proportion and relation the nature, purpose and conditions of our being. A belief in immortality is made so vital a point in most religions because it's a self-evident necessity if we are to rise above the identity with the body and its preoccupation with the material level. But a belief is not sufficient to alter radically this mistake of perspective. The true spiritual knowledge of our being in time can come to us only when we live in the consciousness of our immortality. We have to awaken to a concrete sense of our perpetual being in time and of our timeless existence.
Do you think that the West is, especially religions of the West, are beginning to feel that there is reincarnation?
Not the religions,
Not the religion.
but many people in the West are having out-of-body experiences, and so they know that many of these truths which we speak about are real. But there is a big resistance in the Christian world. But the Pope had certain things and he made some statements which disturbed the
Yes,
church.
right.
You've heard of that.
I've heard, yeah.
So, many of these concepts that they have, he was almost challenging them, but he was very careful with his language. Not the present one, the one who was
Previous,
past.
yeah.
So, Swami is speaking about two immortalities. One is when you go to the higher level of consciousness by making your mind silent, you know that you have always had past lives and so you are immortal in time. But if you go beyond that, I have nothing to do with my body, mind, life. My lives and all that I don't even remember. I am part of the infinite eternal. That's the timeless immortality. You want me to read sometimes the reading of the summary helps. Yeah, so we read that. The supreme change from a normal life to a spiritual life must perforce cancel the temporal ignorance. Means, I am not only body, mind, life. Man lives from moment to moment, and this view is limited only to the present life from birth to death of body. Now, Swami is saying, man lives from moment to moment, but when you go to the higher plane of consciousness in the higher mind, there are no moments. Time is still. That is that Eckhart's famous talking about the power of now. He goes on stressing that. Okay, so now is no past, no present. It's just time is static, timeless. So that's what Swami is talking about. This narrow limitation to only the present life is due to an excessive preoccupation with the material life. But if the identification with body, mind, life is transcended and we live in the subliminal and the superconscient, it is possible to know that we have always lived in different bodies and we shall live always in future bodies. This knowledge of our eternal existence is essential for understanding ourselves correctly. The temporal ignorance vitiates our view of existence in the world. Okay. We neither understand its meaning, nor its purpose, nor the conditions of our life. We don't understand, because if you are in this, why is there pain and why is there suffering in the world? All these things we don't understand. But if you go there to the higher planes of consciousness, you understand to a certain extent the reason for all these so-called negative elements. That is why most religions insist on the immortality of the soul. But a simple mental belief in immortality is not enough. We have to make the sense of immortality real, not keep it as a mere belief. We must realize the soul and sense completely its eternal existence. That's a temporal ignorance. We go to the next para. Now he is discussing the immortality. For immortality, in its fundamental sense, does not mean merely some kind of personal survival of the bodily death. Most human beings think that my life, when it ends, my body goes, everything goes away. But it's not. The soul lives, and but that's not, simply saying, that's not immortality. Okay? We are immortal by the eternity of our self-existence without beginning or end. Okay? We have always existed in the past, and we will always exist in the future. Beyond the whole succession of physical births and deaths through which we pass, beyond the alternations of our existence in this and other worlds. When in this physical world, then there is death, your soul goes into other worlds. It depends at which level, but there are many, many worlds. So you go into those worlds. That's what Srimad is talking about. Beyond the ordinary. The spirit's timeless existence is a true immortality. Timeless existence. When you realize that you have always existed and you don't need to depend at all on the physical world, that's a timeless existence. That is necessary. Okay. There is no doubt a secondary meaning of the word which has its truth. For corollary to this true immortality, there exists a perpetual continuity of our temporal existence and experience from life to life, from world to world, after the dissolution of the physical body. But this is a natural consequence of our timelessness, which expresses itself here as a perpetuity in eternal time. So he is now stressing that there are two types of immortality. One immortality, you go to spiritual planes of consciousness, oh, my past lives were there. I am not limited only to this, I am immortal. And I can also exist in future. That's time immortality. But there is a timeless immortality which has nothing to do with the physical world. Nothing to do with past lives. I have always existed. I am part of the eternal.
But that's not the highest yet. Or is it?
Well, you can get glimpses of it in the lower also.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's what he said. You can get glimpses of it. Yeah. The realization of timeless immortality comes by the knowledge of self in the non-birth and non-becoming, and the changeless spirit within us. Okay? The non-birth and non-becoming is when you are in the higher planes of consciousness. If you are in birth and becoming, you are in the physical world. That's a time immortality you can experience in birth and becoming. But in the non-birth and non-becoming, which is the higher planes of consciousness, you can get the timeless immortality. By the first realization, we become free from the obscuring subjection to the chain of birth and death, that supreme object of so many Indian disciplines. So Indian disciplines, the basic idea is, the world is full of suffering and pain. You must do your yoga in such a way that you don't need to take rebirth again. But that's a time immortality. So that's what Srimad is saying. It's not. You have to realize that you are timeless, eternal, immortal. A realization of timeless existence by itself might not include the truth of that experience of persistent self in eternal time. Now, this is interesting, we'll discuss that. Just 1 minute, I'll go back to what I read earlier. By the first realization, we become free from obscuring subjection to the chain of birth and death. In other words, birth and death doesn't stop me. I have always existed in the past and I will exist in the future. That supreme object of so many Indian disciplines. By the second realization of what Srimad is calling the timeless immortality, added to the first, we are able to possess freely, with right knowledge, without ignorance, without bondage, by the chain of our actions, the experience of the spirit in its successions of time eternity. So if you go to the third level, you can exist in the physical world and still know you are immortal. That is the timeless immortality. Now he is saying something interesting again. Okay. The experience of spirit in its succession of time eternity. A realization of timeless existence by itself might not include the truth of that experience of persistent self in eternal time. Okay. Persistent self of eternal time may not include that. We will discuss that. A realization of survival of death by itself might still give room for a beginning or end to our existence. He is referring to the Christian idea that when the body is born, a soul is created in time, and when it dies, it lives forever afterwards, but in heaven, not in the physical world. So, that's not timeless eternity, timeless immortality. Because you have been created. Timeless immortality is no beginning, no end. So this is one of the things which Ramdo says is illogical. To say that something is created, but it has no end, it doesn't bear out. The Gita also insists on that. It says, if there is a beginning, there must necessarily be an end. But if there is no creation, then it will have no end either. So that's what is being referred to here. Okay, so. But in either realization, truly envisage a side and other side of one truth to exist consciously in eternity and not in the bondage of the hour and the succession of the moments is the substance of the change. So you can be in the physical world and know that the body-mind life may be subject to death, but you are not subject to death. Your soul is not subject to death. You can live in that way. So, to exist is the first condition of the divine consciousness and divine life. So, if you want a divine life, you have to realize the timeless immortality while you are in the physical world. That's what he's saying. To possess and govern from that inner eternity of being, the course and process of the becoming is the second. The dynamic condition with, as its practical outcome, a spiritual self-possession and self-mastery. These changes are possible only by withdrawal from our absorbing material preoccupation that does not necessitate a rejection or neglect of the life in the body. Usually the Indian idea is reject the body-mind life and get your immortality. But that is not what Swami is saying. Without rejecting the body-mind life, get your immortality. Okay, so that does not necessitate a rejection or neglect of the life in the body and a constant living on the inner and higher planes of the mind and spirit. For the heightening of our consciousness into its spiritual principle is effected by an ascent and a stepping back inward. So either you go up or go into a psychic being. Both these movements are essential. Out of our transient life from moment to moment into the eternal life of our immortal consciousness. But with it, there comes also a widening of our range of consciousness and field of action in time and a taking up and a higher use of our mental, vital and corporeal existence. There arises a knowledge of our being no longer as a consciousness dependent on the body, but as an eternal spirit which uses all the worlds and all lives for various self-experience. You don't feel the necessity of rejecting the body-mind life. You can live here and still have a divine consciousness. We see it to be a spiritual entity, soul, possessed of a continuous soul life, perpetually developing its activities through successive physical existences. A being determining its own becoming. So you see that your soul is taking birth again and again in the physical world so that you develop yourself. In that knowledge, not ideative, not belonging to the mind, but felt in our very substance, it becomes possible to live not as slaves of a blind karmic impulsion, but as masters, subject only to the divine within us, of our being and nature. So much a discussion for the temporal ignorance. You have to get rid of your temporal ignorance.
So chronologically, looking at the time that Sri Aurobindo was in the ashram, and disciples started coming to him, most of them are gone now.
Yes.
Are some of them back here working towards the supermind?
That's very difficult to say. But many of those sadhaks have come back.
They have.
Yeah, we know several cases.
I see.
Mother has identified those cases also.
Ah.
I'll read the summary of what we read just now.
Good.
What exactly is immortality? It is not certainly the survival of the personality after death of the body. That is not immortality. Okay? Because after the death of the body, the soul goes into the higher planes, but it may not know that it is immortal. That's not immortality. That's what Swami is saying. The soul must realize that it is immortal. And for that, probably it has to be while the body is there and living still. Okay, so I give you one example of Benjamin. Benjamin was a gentleman here. He was a local Tamilian, but in French culture, who used to make mattresses and pillows and bed covers and caps and all that for the ashram, which is there now in the children's dispensary. He used to work there. But when he passed away, he didn't even know that he has passed away. The soul used to come to mother, and mother says very interestingly, there is a correspondence between the subtle body and the gross body. It's very interesting. When he used to go to mother while he was living, he used to comb his hair in a particular way and dress in a particular way. After he passed away, he used to go to mother exactly in that same form again. And mother had to tell him, he is complaining that why are they meddling with my room? They are changing the furniture, they are doing this, they are doing that. Why are they doing all that? So mother had to gently break it to him that you don't have a body anymore. Okay. So he doesn't know that he is immortal. That's what I was mentioning. So immortality is not just leaving the body. Immortality is the soul realizing that it has always existed. That's a spiritual experience. Okay. What exactly is immortality? It is certainly not the survival of the personality after the death of the body. There are two terms of the concept of immortality. The first is the realization of the eternal existence of the soul, irrespective of all conditions, physical or supraphysical. Okay. It is the eternal existence of the individual soul outside time and space. Okay. Outside time and space, not in the body. But man's soul is also immortal in time and space. So that you have to realize. The difference is clear, huh? So when you have given up your body and you go there, while you are living, then you realize that you are immortal. That is time immortality. But you can be, if you go even higher up, you realize that it has nothing to do with the physical world. So even when you are living in the physical world, you can have a timeless immortality. That's what I was mentioning. But the man's soul is also immortal in time and space. The first immortality is the eternity of the soul, which is timeless and spaceless. The second immortality is the eternity of the individual soul, which undergoes repeated births and deaths in time and space. So you realize that you have had past lives. Okay? But that is immortality in time and space. So, the timeless immortality is realized by non-birth and non-becoming, not taking physical birth in the world. the eternity of soul existence in time is realized by the birth and the becoming. You have to realize that while you are living in the physical world, that I am immortal. Okay, so man must realize his timeless immortality and be poised in that state to experience time immortality. This means that man is no longer slave to the lower nature of body-mind life. This becomes possible only when man becomes disengaged and unattached to the lower nature. This is liberation. Now he can freely use the lower existence for a divine life. So for a divine life on earth, you must have both time immortality and timeless immortality at the same time.
Namaste, Om. Thank you. We'll see you again
7, 6, 8.
on Monday, 7, 6, 8.
At the same time.